Sports governance. Sports awareness. Sports accessibility. Sports facilities development. Sports linkages. Institutionalization of the Philippine Sports Institute. Legislative initiatives and interagency collaborations. Bahagi na ng buhay nating mga Pilipino ang sports. Mula sa panahon ng unos, sa tamis ng tagumpay, sa kabila ng pagbabago ng buhay, ang Philippine Sports Commission ay patuloy na maglilingkod sa sambayanan at atletang Pilipino.
Good day to everyone and welcome to Make It Sports. For today's topic, we will cover athletes first. National athletes, professional athletes, and student athletes. I am Attorney Alberto C. Agra, your sports law for all friend. Let us begin this discussion with the basic law on sports. And in the Philippines, the basic law, the fundamental law, will be about the 1987 Constitution. Under our fundamental law, there are specific provisions on sports. And sports under our Constitution has a deep and broad purpose and meaning. It promotes our right to health, and sports is geared towards patriotism, love of country, nationalism, social progress, and total human liberation and development. Our Constitution emphasizes the importance of physical education, of competitions here and abroad, of amateur competitions. And for us who are members of the Philippine community, it is important that sports will help us in terms of self-discipline, teamwork, excellence, and of course, being healthy and alert. This emphasizes as well the importance of partnerships between educational institutions and athletic clubs and other sectors. In sum, this is what I call sports for a purpose. Sports is not just for sports. There are rights and programs as stated in our Constitution: right to health, instill health consciousness, physical education, sports programs, competitions, here and abroad, amateur sports, and equally important would be partnerships in sports. And why sports? Patriotism, nationalism, pagmamahal sa ating bansa, social progress, total human liberation and development, disiplina, teamwork, excellence, healthy and alert citizenry. And here, according to the United Nations, sports can be the means and the ends for development and peace. These are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And if you look at the icons would depict athletes for gender equality. Sports can be used to eradicate poverty so that there will be no hunger. And of course, good health and well-being. Of course, quality education, partnerships, and even protection of the environment. So again, sports has a noble, broad, deep purpose. Sports has a purpose. Now let's talk about athletes. There are various types of athletes: national athletes, student athletes, professional athletes, and we have a lot of recreational athletes and club athletes. In terms of the sector that they represent, able-bodied, para-athletes, youth and kids, seniors and women, sexual orientation, and the whole LGBTQIA community. In short, sports is for everyone. Sports should not discriminate. Sports is for all, for a healthy and alert citizenry. Again, for this topic, we will cover 3 types of athletes. The first of which will be national athletes. Who are they? Who do they represent? What do they represent? National athletes, as defined under RA 10699, which became law in 2015, is defined as follows. A national athlete, including athletes with disabilities, are, number 1, Filipino citizens. They are recognized by the Philippine Sports Commission. They are likewise accredited by the Philippine Olympic Committee through the national sports associations. And the reason why this definition is important, because national athletes, depending on their performance and their inclusion in the roster, they will be entitled to incentives and benefits, which we will outline shortly. And like what happened to Hidelin, to Carlos Yulo, and to EJ Obiena, the reason why they are national athletes and they are high performance or elite athletes, and the reason why they are enjoying a lot of incentives and cash benefits from government through the Philippine Sports Commission, because they have brought home glory to the flag and to the country because they joined international sports competitions. And when we talk about international sports competitions, they are regular major competitions like the Olympics, like the Asian Games, like the Southeast Asian Games. There are also world-level championships sanctioned by the respective international federations. We have Asian-level competitions, and there are qualifiers to be able to join these major competitions, world level and also Asian level. So national athletes and international sports competitions are both defined under RA 10699. And how do we classify them? There are various positions. One, are they employees? Are they service contractors? Are they independent contractors? Are they service providers? And lastly, are they beneficiaries? It is my position that they are not employees. They are beneficiaries of the National Sports Association, of the national federations. They are not under the control of these NSAs and national federations. They are beneficiaries because they represent the flag, they represent the country, and actually the national sports associations serve their interests. So they are, to my mind, they are beneficiaries. I also advocate that hopefully all the NSAs in the Philippines and even abroad would enter into agreements with their national athletes that define, among others, that prescribe, among others, that they are beneficiaries. And like any other agreement, the rights and responsibilities of the NSAs and the athletes must be defined and set forth in the national agreements. In the agreements with between the NSAs and the athletes. Again, it is my position that they are beneficiaries. The International Olympic Committee and the World Players Associations, in their respective documents, have outlined the rights of athletes. If you look at these, the two sets of rights, they are almost identical. No to discrimination, no to harassment, no to bullying, safe environment, access to information, freedom of expression, the right to complain, gender equality and gender representation. Okay? And also important for everyone would be the right to due process, which means being advised or notified of a complaint if there's one, and be able to defend oneself. And being an athlete does not just concern one's physique or physical fitness. As emphasized in the athlete's rights, it also talks about mental and, of course, emotional, social well-being, psychological well-being of athletes. And again, not just for national athletes, no, for all athletes, all these rights must be advanced. In terms of benefits under Republic Act 10699, it enumerates a lot of benefits. It provides for cash incentives, and for the national sports associations, they have the freedom, and hopefully based on their agreements with the athletes, can provide for other benefits. So what are the benefits found in the law if you are a national athlete, meaning Filipino citizen, recognized by the PSC and POC, and has represented and brought glory to the country? Discount, let's say in restaurants, free medical and dental services in government hospitals, PhilHealth, SSS, living quarters, training centers, scholarships, retirement, and even death benefits. And for those who compete in the Olympics and Asian and regional games, depending on your performance, whether you brought home the gold, silver, or bronze, you will be entitled to cash benefits. However, under the current law, for para-athletes who are podium finishers, under the law, they are only entitled to 50% or half of what the able-bodied athletes would get under the law. For the NSAs, they're not prohibited from, in fact, they are encouraged, depending on their financial capacity, to give them allowance, provide for their competitions, travel, accommodations, training, gear, and even insurance. It is important that these national athletes are recognized and found in the roster of athletes being supported by the Philippine Sports Commission. The Philippine Sports Commission is a government agency. It is a regulatory agency attached to the office of the president. It is the only policymaking and coordinating body of all amateur sports. Later on, we will distinguish what is an amateur sport from a professional sport. And here I enumerated 4 of the key functions of the Philippine Sports Commission. Plan, implement, and oversee an integrated amateur sports program. Maintain linkages. Establish and develop sports facilities and centers. And lastly, as we have explained earlier, provide incentives and recognition not just to athletes, but to associations, referees, game officials, coaches, and trainers. The Philippine Olympic Committee, on the other hand, is not a government entity. It is a private entity. It is registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission as a non-stock corporation. Under its articles and bylaws, it encourages the development of high-performance sports, not just for elite athletes, but sport for all. It is the one who selects the athletes who will represent, let's say, in the Olympics or the Asian Games and the Southeast Asian Games. It has the sole authority to determine who these athletes are. And under its bylaws, for a particular sport, there can only be one national sports association that will be the governing body for that sport in the Philippines. While the Philippine Olympic Committee is a private entity, it is recognized under Republic Act 10699 and RA 6847. Under the International Olympic Committee Charter, they also recognize national Olympic committees. And of course, here in the Philippines, it is the POC. It is the primary responsibility to send athletes for international competitions. And again, it also recognizes national athletes and coaches. It is important that if in every sport here in the Philippines, there is a national sports association, and as mentioned earlier, there's only one. There should only be one recognized by the International Federation, recognized by the PSC, and recognized by the POC. What are the responsibilities of an NSA? To develop the sport nationwide and to select the athletes. And under the charter of the Philippine Olympic Committee, there are 3 types of members. The regular members representing Olympic sports, associate members, and recognized members. NSAs, the existence of NSAs are likewise recognized by law under RA 6847. Let me highlight that in terms of the rules for that particular sport, that National Sports Association is autonomous and shall have exclusive technical control over the implementation of the rules for that particular sport. It can organize competition, it selects the athletes, but of course, before they're sent abroad for international competitions, they must be endorsed or by the Philippine Olympic Committee and hopefully supported by the Philippine Sports Commission. When we talk about our para-athletes, so we have the Philippine Olympic Committee for the able-bodied athletes, and we have the International Paralympic Committee. And here we in the Philippines, we have the National Paralympic Committee, which is PhilSPADA, the Philippine Sports Association for the Differently Abled. The reason why we're promoting Paralympic sports, because we want an exclusive society, because sports is not just for able-bodied athletes. Sports is for all, including para-athletes. Now let's talk about professional athletes. If you look at this materials, it is professional athlete plays sports for a living. Yan po ang kanyang trabaho. They are paid for that services. At yung services niya would be playing for a particular sport in a particular league. Abroad, particularly in the United States of America, they are considered employees of their leagues, of their teams. And even in one article, they're even considered as entertainment professionals. So compared to national athletes who are amateur athletes, a professional athletes play sports for a living. Yan ang kanilang trabaho. And here is a distinction between a professional athlete and an amateur athlete in terms of the compensation or their payment or their rewards. So again, what will be the reward, financial reward for a professional athlete? Their paid salaries or even incentives, whether they play for an individual event or a team sport. But for amateur athletes who are student athletes, what will be their reward? Their reward will not be salaries. Their reward will be, of course, opportunities to compete and maybe later on become professional athletes. And the reward would be athletic scholarships. We will talk about student athletes, their benefits shortly. So here are some questions. If the answers to all these 6 questions are in the affirmative or yes, then it can be argued that our professional athletes in basketball, in volleyball, and in football could be employees of their respective leagues. So, thus, or can the team, do they select the player? Is there a rigorous selection process? Do they pay him or her wages? Can they dismiss the athlete? Does the team, does it have control over how an athlete acts and its performance? Can the team require exclusivity? An athlete cannot play in any other team or any other sport. And lastly, can the team regulate the competitions wherein the athlete cannot play in any other competition other than what is allowed by the team? So if the answer to all this, it can be argued that the professional athletes are not independent contractors, they're not service providers, they are not beneficiaries, but they are employees of the teams and the leagues. Comparing it to the situation of our referees in the Philippine Basketball Association, wherein the referees are the only absolute and final authority on the playing court. According to the Supreme Court, the leagues and of course PBA doesn't have any control over them because it is up to their exercise of their freedom to determine to make a particular call. So, according to the Supreme Court, in this case of Bernarte versus PBA, the referees are not employees of PBA. They are independent contractors because PBA has no control over the calls that will be made by the referees. Before a professional athlete can be considered a professional athlete and play in the various leagues here in the Philippines, they must secure their licenses from the Games and Amusement Board. GAB is also a government agency similar to the Philippine Sports Commission. Before a league can undertake its competition, they must they secure permits from the GAB. GAB as an agency also issues rules, and if there's any violation of these rules, then the team, the league, and even the athletes can be sanctioned. Here's a list of the 21 regulated sports by GAB. They're classified into three: professional basketball and other professional sports, boxing, and horse race betting. Let's now talk about student athletes. A student athlete is defined under Republic Act 10676. This is a law since 2015. There are 5 elements to be considered a student athlete. Number 1, currently enrolled in a school. Number 2, not a part-time program, but in a full-time program. That athlete must be in good standing in that school. He or she wishes to represent the school where in an inter-school competition. And what are the inter-school competitions? We call these the athletic associations. And under that law, there are 9 specified athletic associations, but there could be more. So here are the 9 athletic associations wherein a student athlete can play and compete representing the school. And under this law, this is called the Student Athletes Protection Act. It underscores the basic policies on education. Education must be for all. If you recall, under our Constitution, sports through physical education should promote healthy and alert citizenry to hone their skills. And again, these athletes are not called athlete students, but they are called student athletes. Why? Because they are first and foremost a student, and therefore a student athlete, again, must be in good standing. They must comply with all the requirements and meet the standards of their respective schools. So the quality education, let me highlight the last phrase, while honing his or her skill, reaching his or her full potential as an athlete in an amateur sports setting. So comparing it to professional athletes, they are, of course, in professional sports, but for national athletes and student athletes, they are in what we call an amateur sports setting. And under this law, there are 2 sets of protection. Number 1, can there be a residency requirement when an student athlete transfers from one school to another? And number 2, what are the appropriate, reasonable benefits that a school may give to an athlete? Let's talk about residency. There are 3 types of residency. High school to college, there's no residency requirement. High school to high school, maximum 1 year residency in the new school before he or she can represent that school. And the duration, the rule must be prescribed by the athletic association, which is the same for college. From one college to another college, the maximum period residency, which must be set by the athletic association, should not be more than 1 year. And a student rather, who transfers from one school to the other must not be penalized by the previous school. And here are the forms of penalties which cannot be imposed by the previous school: finding of any charge, requirement payment of tuition when there was none, failure or delay in the release of grades, giving an incomplete grade, or any other form of punishment. Again, this law talks about the protection of athletes. The other form of protection will be to provide for reasonable benefits. And here's a list: school fees, tuition, scholarships, board and lodging, uniform, regular reasonable monthly allowance set by the Athletic Association, medical services, insurance, and similar benefits. So number 6 tells us that there could be other benefits, but it must be similar to 1 to 5, meaning it must not amount to commercialization. The benefits must not be similar to the benefits received by professional athletes. So while the list is inclusive, it is not unrestricted. And under the law, it says no to commercialization. The student athletes are, again, they play within the sphere of amateur sports. They should not be considered as professional sports where there is commercialization. So giving house and lots, giving condominiums, giving cars, and even businesses and franchises may be considered as unreasonable, excessive, and therefore could amount to commercialization. But hopefully, all the athletic associations that we enumerated earlier, and there are 9 presently, they would come out with the rules of what can be given, the amounts that can be given, and what cannot be given in order to prevent commercialization. When we talk about student athletes, we have 2 government agencies that regulate and ensure their protection. We have the Department of Education up to high school, and for college, not just for public schools, but for private schools, we have the Commission on Higher Education. So it is up to these agencies to ensure the protection of the rights of our student athletes. These 2 agencies can even handle complaints against schools and the athletic associations. We have another law pertaining to student athletes, RA 11180. It ensures parity and equality between male student athletes and female student athletes. However, this law only pertains to tertiary education or higher education or colleges. And again, under this law, the schools must report to the CHED regarding the ratio of male-female athletes, male-female coaches, and male-female scholarships. 2020, we have a landmark legislation creating a secondary education, a high school for sports. And this is the National Academy of Sports. This is an agency of government attached to the Department of Education. Its main campus will be in New Clark City, but hopefully in the future, it will set up satellite offices. It must adopt an appropriate curriculum of academics and, of course, physical education, honing their skills to become amateur athletes and professional athletes in the future. What are the standards of the National Academy of Sports? Not just local, not just regional, but world-class sports programs and facilities. In sum, let us compare and contrast the athletes and compare and contrast the government agencies. First, the athletes. National athletes, it is my position that they are beneficiaries. Professional athletes are paid for being in sport, for playing in a particular league. And student athletes, they represent their schools, but they must be in good standing with their respective schools. So professional athletes, if it meets all the elements or requirements for being an employee, then they are employees. But for national athletes and student athletes, they are amateurs, of course, compared to professional athletes. National athletes, the Philippine Sports Commission is the one which oversees and develops amateur sports. So that will be for national athletes. For professional athletes, we have the Games and Amusement Board. And for student athletes, we have the Department of Education for high school and the CHED for tertiary level. Here are the agencies responsible for sports development in the Philippines. If you notice, this talks about these agencies are at the national level and even at the local government level. So governance in sports here in the Philippines is horizontally decentralized and vertically decentralized while maintaining certain centralized functions. Philippine Sports Commission, Games and Amusement Board, Department of Education, Commission on Higher Education. We have local government units responsible for sports. We have the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Misto Mindanao. We have provinces, we have cities, we have municipalities, and even barangays. And we have a high school on sports, and that is the NAS, or the National Academy of Sports. So this graph, this slide, compares and contrasts the various mandates, the functions of the Philippine Sports Commission. Again, amateur sports, Games and Amusement Board for professional sports. You have to get licenses for the athletes and permits for the leagues. Department of Education, no? There must be quality physical education embedded in their programs. We have the Commission on Higher Education for tertiary, both public and private schools, and for local government units as part of their mandate to promote the general welfare, to hold sports events, to enter into partnerships. They are duty-bound to promote sports in their respective territories. So this ends my presentation about athletes first. National athletes, professional athletes, and student athletes.
Bahagi na ng buhay nating mga Pilipino ang sports. Mula sa panahon ng unos, sa tamis ng tagumpay, sa kabila ng pagbabago ng buhay, ang Philippine Sports Commission ay patuloy na magiging lingkod sa sambayanan at atletang Pilipino.